Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, USA Global TV and Radio watchers and listeners. I am so happy to have you with us today for this episode on Talking Heads around humor in leadership. My name is Mariska du Preez, and I'll be your host and presenter today on this show. And as I mentioned, we are on the Talking Heads episode or show here on USA Global TV and Radio. So, humor in leadership, a taboo? I don't know. Let's find out. So, I want you to think about yesterday. Yes, yesterday. How many times did you actually laugh yesterday? And for most of us, it will most probably be a very low, if even registering on the scale sort of amount. Now, there is some very interesting research that they did, and they had a bit of a look at over time, how much do we laugh in general as human beings? Now, children have a tendency to laugh about 400 to 4,000 times a day. Right, so this is a lot of laughter. And if you cast your mind back and remember your younger years, or you've been in a kindergarten, you will know that there's a lot of laughing going on. Sometimes not crying too, but mostly laughing. And as we grow older, it gets snipped out of us. And we think we need to be all serious. And then we go into the workforce and it gets even worse. So the laughter sort of dies down for a good chunk of time until we reach our 80s, which some people even don't get to. So there's a big portion of our life when we do not laugh. Now, therein lies a little bit of a concern if, you enjoy laughing as much as I do. And there's also the other element to it that if and when we are in the workplace, is it okay to utilize humor, to bring a little bit of humor into that space and be able to laugh? Now, there is also some other research that they did around laughter and play. And one of the things that children does really well is laugh and play. And they found that for all of us here on this planet, the bigger the brain of the animal, the more they enjoy playing. And the better we learn from it. So, from an evolutionary point of view, being able to laugh and play actually helps us to learn. So, taking that into consideration and understanding that as a leader, typically for us in our teams, we really want them to think of new ways of doing things, to improve, to be productive. Laughing and playing might be that key that we need. Now, they also found that humor in general results in team performance going up, resilience and coping for us as individuals also going up, and as leaders, your leadership effectiveness is impacted by humor. Yes, this might be because it builds trust, it boosts our moral and productivity indexes, as well as it bolsters our relationships. So there's something to be said about humor. And I know what you're thinking. Well, you told that joke in the office and it fell flat. Yes. Or we might have used our way of humor, which we also have our individual ways of finding things funny. And it didn't quite go off so well. And there might be a reason for this. Now, they have continued with this research and they also found that as we are all individuals and we enjoy things a little bit differently, there's different styles of humor. Now, one of the people, Rod Martin, and his colleagues had a bit of a look and they have a quiz or a questionnaire around humor and how it works. So, what he found is that we have affiliative humor, we have self enduring humor, we have aggressive humor, and we have self defeating humor. Now, the ones in the workplace, typically that works better, is our affiliative and self enhancing humor. And why is this? Well, if we have humor where we are a little bit stabby or sharp ended with it, it has a tendency to be able to alienate people. And in general, it may or may not land well. And of course, we need to know the people that we use it with. Whereas with affiliative as well as self enhancing humor, the likelihood of it being received well is increased. So, understanding what type of humor we typically lean towards would help us to also know what type of humor we can use. And the other element to always take into consideration is our environment and the people that we work with. Because, yes, something might be funny to us, or we might say it in a way that we think it would land funnily. Or we might even go and research a couple of things around humor to see how to tell a joke or how to be witty within our presentations. And it may or may not come across too well with our audience because, well, it is not in the telling, like with communication. The speaking of it is one part of it, and the receiving of it is the other. So, understanding our audience, understanding who it is that we are utilizing the humor with is very important, especially today as we are working in international organizations or with international people around us. So, we have all sorts of different flavors in the way that we think about humor. Some cultures think about humor quite differently to other cultures. Even if you think about something as silly as a meme, those little cat videos that you have a tendency to scroll through, yes, I know, I do it too. I really like them. Now, those little cat videos, some of them will be hilarious and you will laugh so much. And the next one might not be as hilarious to you, but your friend might laugh their head off. Now, why is this? It is because the way that we think about humor is different. And because of this, one thing will be funny to one person and something else funny to someone else. Now, in general, I am aware of the fact that the British sense of humor can be a little bit more dry and dark from time to time. And I have to say, I appreciate that type of humor. And this is also something that since I've immigrated, so in South Africa, we do have a tendency to like to laugh and we, well, make fun of round about everything and anything that we can make fun of. In New Zealand, it's a little bit of a different story. Around here, the sense of humor is a little bit different, and I am still adjusting to it. So it might be that you are also in an environment where you need to adjust to the type of humor for the people around you because they may or may not get yours. And that is where, as a leader, it's really important to understand. It's not necessarily what we find funny, it is also what the people in our vicinity would actually find funny. I have found quite a few times speaking to some of my US friends that I would say something quite innocently and they will burst out laughing. And I need to figure out what it was that I said that was so funny. They typically help me, right? And some of it might be part of the language because, yes, English is my second language. So from time to time, I do use words in a very unique and sometimes a little bit of a different way. So it might be that even those elements might come in and present themselves as funny in one place where you didn't even think about it as being funny. So when we think about humor, we can also think about it as to in the situations when we bring it up. So humor is one of those things that it works really well. It helps us. It helps us to build trust, as I mentioned earlier on. It helps us with the overall morale. If people can laugh together, we bond. It helps us to build those relationships a lot faster, especially if we are able to laugh together, not at each other. So, ensuring that this happens and there is a togetherness that actually brings us together instead of an at that will, in all likelihood, push us apart. We want to make sure that the type of humor that we bring in is acceptable for all parties. We also want to make sure that the type of humor that we utilize, especially if maybe we're not as good as someone else at telling a joke, is using stuff that we can over time develop a little bit more. Now, humor is a skill. No, everybody is not the same when it comes to telling a joke. I get that. And I'll be the first to say, normally my joke telling, not the greatest. I am good, however, at storytelling. So I would rather tell a story than a joke because jokes has a tendency to fall flat for me. I smile way too fast and normally spoil the whole punchline. So if you are a little bit like me and you can't really tell jokes, one of the things or one of the tricks that you can try out is taking a few of the good examples from our stand-up comedy environment. No, not the telling of the jokes, but looking for ways of improv. So one of the elements that stand-up comedy uses is improv. And they will basically look around the room. And if there's something that looks a bit peculiar, or maybe somebody sneezed in the audience, they might call it out. And they call it out in a light-hearted way. So it might be that they were trying to make a point and the person sneezed while they were at the time when they were making the point. So they need to work with that. And understanding how to do this and look for the lightness in the room, the things that might be a little bit funny. That is what we as leaders can bring in. It is light, it is hearty, and that is the type of humor that, especially in the workplace, will be a lot more acceptable than some of the more risque type of humor that some people enjoy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, culture also makes a big difference. So, understanding our audience and what might be culturally acceptable to them as something that is funny and what might not. So, one of my colleagues had a presentation that they had to do for a community within the Singapore environment. And they didn't know what the type of humor was like. So, what they asked them to do was to supply a whole bunch of memes. And they looked at the different ones that came through that these participants would find funny and then incorporated those into their slides. This, of course, resulted in great laughter that was appropriate for the environment. So, understanding how to utilize the different forms of humor within our workspace is also good. For instance, we are more than welcome to use some humor in a presentation. I don't know about you guys, but typically most business presentations has the tendency to be extremely dry and over time can talk you to sleep. We don't want that. And as I mentioned before, our brains like to play. And because it likes to play, it will also retain a lot more information if we can have a little bit of playfulness and humor in our presentation. A place, of course, maybe not to use humor would be your performance reviews. It might not go so well. So, understanding which situations are better to use humor is also very helpful for us as leaders, because then, especially if we feel that this is a skill that we haven't quite developed yet and we're still in our uneven baby shoes on them, we can always try it out in areas where we feel a little bit more comfortable. Now, I know public speaking is not necessarily the area that is most comfortable for most people. And trying out a few of these well practiced lines up front with friends and family and seeing how they land will also take you a long way towards bringing some well natured humor into your workspace. Of course, telling jokes and using slides and things like that isn't the only way that we can bring humor into the workplace. Not taking ourselves so seriously, and sometimes even being able to laugh at ourselves when we made a mistake helps the people that we work with, especially when we are leaders, to see us as human. Because for a lot of leaders, especially the higher we go up in our leadership journey, the more people start to put us on a pedestal or feel removed from us because there's this giant gap in our brain that we create because of this person's status. And being able to laugh at ourselves and bringing in a little humor helps us to, well, look more human. Of course, making sure that this is light-hearted and not aggressive or necessarily self-deprecating. So self-deprecating humor is one of those things that definitely needs to be used sparingly. And from the research, it was also evident that men can, in all likelihood, use it a little bit more than ladies, because for the female, persuasion, self deprecating humor has a tendency to also knock our confidence in other people's eyes. So, being very aware of how we use humor and the types of humor. So, a quick recap on when you think about humor, what and how to do that in the workplace. Keep it lighthearted. Make sure that you keep it closer to you, so I can make a joke of, well, myself or my mom, but not you or your mom. Of course, she is lovely, I am sure. And then also making sure that we assess the situation to use humor in the right places, as well as the cultures that is within that space. So knowing our audience and what will work well within that space. And that is the humor in leadership. And yes, this is well encouraged with a few antidotes that we need to take into consideration so that our humor stays in the right spots and actually generate the laughter and community that we need. Until our next Talking Heads, I hope that you guys do have a little bit more laughter within your space. And if you have no other way of bringing humor in, you can also add some of those cat videos. Typically, they work well. Until next time, bye.